we are not doctors.
Yes.
We are not trained to that level. We face significant challenges. We took him to hospital, and 2 hours later, they phoned me to transfer him to another hospital. He was running a marathon in the Moot area.
Yeah.
Pretoria
Moot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he collapsed.
Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It is that time again for us as the Town-Tok podcast to share with you some of the information that we normally do. Now, this is what we do. We inform, we educate, and we also entertain. Without the waste of time, ladies and gentlemen, today we've got another guest which is very, very important, very close to my heart. You'll see why I'm saying that. Now, remember to subscribe, like, and share our videos. We are on YouTube. Remember, as I always say, YouTube is international. Wherever you are in the whole world, you are able to see us. Today, we've got a special guest, ladies and gentlemen. Remember, my name is Mzima Singailu, and I brought you a very, very, very special guest. His name is Hannes Bosman. Goeiedag, meneer.
Hey, MZ.
Hoe gaan het?
Goed, man. Goed.
Nee, man. It's a pleasure. I'm very, very excited to have finally met you. Now, we want to know, who is Hannes? Where does he come from? Where did he grow up?
So, I was born not too far from here at Kempton Park Hospital before it closed down. But I grew up most of my life in Centurion in Pretoria. My grandparents and my parents have lived there for many, many years, my entire life, basically. I went to school in Centurion, finished high school at Alderaan High School in 1999. And then it was my dream to always go to become a soldier.
Wow.
I wanted to be a soldier. So
what did you like about being a soldier? A gun or?
I grew up in an environment with my grandparents. My grandfather was in the Air Force. My own father was also in the Air Force.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends who had parents in the military. So it was a fascinating world for me.
Wow.
So I enrolled to the South African Navy.
Yeah.
I went down to Saldanha. Unfortunately for me, life had different plans. So my very, very short-lived military career was a total of 4 weeks in Saldanha.
Yeah.
I unfortunately couldn't continue in the military.
Yeah.
So I came back to Pretoria and I was a little perplexed. I didn't know what to do with my life.
Yeah.
And I had a friend that was in the fire department back then.
Okay.
And she introduced me to the world of emergency services, which wasn't something that I ever imagined doing.
Yeah.
But then I enrolled around the end of 2000, beginning of 2001. Yeah. I enrolled for the emergency services training. Back then it was called Basic Ambulance Assistant course, which was a 4-week certificate. Yeah. Registered with the Health Professions Council and started working in the emergency services.
Yeah.
I set myself a personal goal back then. I said, by the time that I'm 25, I want to be a paramedic. So I went through the process. The next level of qualification was intermediate life support, or back then we called it Ambulance Emergency Assistant, AEA. Okay. I completed that. And then...
Where was this? Was this happening? In Pretoria?
So
when you're still staying in Pretoria?
The BAA training was through a college in Pretoria. Okay. The AEA training was actually in Auckland Park. Back then it was called the Trauma Link Training Academy, better known today as the Netcare Academy or Netcare College. Yes. And then on the 13th of February 2006, I started my paramedic training, or advanced life support training, which back then we called CCA, or critical care assistant.
Okay.
It was through the Netcare 911 School for Emergency and Critical Care. They were based in Midrand back then.
Yes.
I had the honor and pleasure of having some really incredible paramedics and doctors as my instructors.
Yes.
The certificate back then was 12 months. So I turned 25 in October of 2006.
Wow.
And on the 2nd of December 2006, I registered as a paramedic with the Health Professions Council.
Yeah. Well, basically, the word paramedics, it's, when we checked, it's like paramedics. It's two words. And when you look at para, it's like it's in line with, Are you free to sort of share that part of the background of the term itself?
Yeah, so I mean, the start of paramedics or paramedicine dates back to pretty much the First and the Second World Wars. So in the First World War, they had stretcher bearers. So these were volunteers that would run onto the battlefield and collect casualties and take them back to medical care.
Yes, just to close the distance between where the war was taking place and the hospital.
Yes, exactly.
That's somewhere in 1844 or somewhere there.
So World War I, yes, that's 1912, 1918, around there somewhere. I don't have the dates. But then during World War II, it moved, there was a lot of development in our understanding of casualty treatment, medical treatment. Yeah. So then medics were sent out with squads, and they were a little bit more advanced, trained, but still the casualties were taken. The primary function of the medic was to take the casualty back to a medical station where a doctor and nurses would provide medical care.
Absolutely.
A field hospital. So then during the Vietnam War, the Americans, that's where we have the idea of the golden hour was born there, where they realized that within the first hour from the time of someone's injury, that is the most critical time where you can make the biggest difference in someone's life.
Either bad or good. Whatever decision that you take, if maybe you delay in taking a medical informed decision, the patient will then go where you are. Yeah.
What they did there was they developed a more rigorous training program for medical or paramedics, or medics, as they like to call them in the military. Mm-hmm. And that then moved to the civilian side, where they started developing, because on the civilian side, it used to be the same. It used to be the fire department. It was an ambulance with a stretcher, and basically the staff was stretcher bearers. They would go to an accident, pick someone up, and take him to hospital as fast as possible. Yes. So around, I'm not 100% about my dates. Some people might correct me. I think around 1988, 87, 88, 89. Yes. Some doctors, one specific doctor that has also played a big part in my training is Dr. Ephraim Kramer. Okay. They brought that principle of paramedicine, pre-hospital emergency care to South Africa. And that's where the short courses that I explained, the BAA, AEA, and CCA, that's where they all had their development. But as you can see from what I've explained, that the paramedicine or paramedic had its origins in being alongside medicine.
Absolutely.
So we are not doctors. Yes. We are not trained to that level. Yes. We are not nurses. We nursing staff. Yeah. I had an instructor, also someone that has mentored me significantly in my life, a paramedic, Johan Klaasen, that once said, we are in the transportation business. We are not in the healing business.
All right.
And initially, you have a moment and you think, wow. But when you think about it, healing takes time. Time heals.
Absolutely.
And where do you find it? You find it in hospital. So hospitals, nurses, doctors, they provide healing to sick and injured.
Yes.
So as paramedics, we intervene in an emergency situation to stabilize and to keep someone alive long enough so that we can transport them to hospital. Because the surgeons and the doctors and the theaters and the nursing staff, they are the ones that actually
qualify.
that help someone to heal. And so yes, we work alongside medicine, and that's where the paramedicine or paramedic comes from.
Now, let's bring it home now. There are a number of challenges in any given situation, or whether it's work or entertainment or everything else. Now, we had different situations in South Africa. We had riots, we had accidents, and especially during certain times like your Easter holidays, your December holidays. What are some of those areas where we get challenges as you get a call to go and attend an accident or an emergency? What are some of the challenges that on day-to-day basis that paramedics come across?
Sure. So South Africa is as unique as our rainbow nation and our constitution and our flag and our anthem. I think that is as unique as our emergency services and our situations. We face significant challenges.
Absolutely.
The quality of the roads, road traffic, people that disregard emergency vehicles is a really big challenge. Yeah. Certain areas are regarded as hotspot areas where the community or certain elements within the community are hostile towards emergency services. As recently as a couple of weeks ago, there was a news article of someone who stole an ambulance with a patient in the back.
Really now?
So we face challenges. Obviously, crime affects everybody in South Africa.
Yes.
The safety of emergency services personnel is obviously always a concern. We are not armed. We are not police officers. We are not security officers. We don't carry body armor or anything of the sort. Yes. Our main purpose in life is to save someone's life, to assist in an emergency. So when we find ourselves in situations where there is violence, then it becomes dangerous for us. We try and avoid getting ourselves in those situations, but it's not always possible.
But it's your call that we need to sort of respect the paramedic personnel or medical personnel for that matter in any kind of a scene, whether we are emotional, whether we are angry or what. What you're saying is that we need to give them space to do their work.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't differentiate. It's not my job to decide who is the criminal and who's the victim. I'm not a police officer. I'm not a judge. My job is to save someone's life. That's what we do. And we don't look at color. We don't look at gender. We don't look at political affiliation. For us as emergency services personnel, life and the preservation of life is our only and our first priority.
You know why I'm asking that, Hannes, is that there's another a pathologist in my area. Normally gives evidence in the court. So some criminals would assume that this guy is part of those people who are oppressing them, in that way. But the pathologist is giving the evidence on what was the cause of this person to die. Maybe he was stabbed or shot, but the pathologist gives the description to the magistrate so that they can determine what is taking place. So we need exactly to sort of lighten up and think about those people that are always saving our lives. Now, what do you enjoy about your work when it's happening, like now, the brighter side of things?
So One thing of the emergency services is that there's no such thing as monotony. Every morning you wake up and every day brings something new. No two calls are exactly the same. No two patients are exactly the same. No two responses to a scene is exactly the same.
Everything
There's
is
always
unique.
something different. So that's very nice for me. There's not that monotony of going to an office and sitting behind. Not that I'm saying that those are bad professions, but I just don't prefer them.
Okay. You're an action man.
And I think the one thing for me that has always been a bright side of the profession is when we are involved with the birth of a child.
Oh.
When we have the privilege, and I say that it is a privilege because it really is a privilege to bring a new life into the world and to assist in delivering a baby. So that for me is always a bright side of the profession.
Yeah.
And then to be able to go home tonight and just, you don't expect a gratitude. You don't. We none. I certainly don't do this job for any gratitude.
It's like praising the fish to swim.
Yeah, exactly. So, but when you go home tonight and you have made the difference in just one person's life, if you were able to just make a small difference in one person's life, then for me that is a good day.
Absolutely. Now we look at if we rate ourselves as South Africa, there are sectors like you have your financial sector, you have this and that, mining and this and the other. Now, when we bring it to ourselves or to yourselves as people in the medical side of things, how would you rate us? Because you'd find other significant people in the continent would be taken elsewhere for medical attention. So how do we then look at ourselves as a country when it comes to the medical side of things, comparatively speaking with other countries?
I think that South Africa rates quite well with regards to the standard of medical care that we can provide. I think the challenges that we face is with regards to the available resources from government.
Yes.
Private healthcare is obviously a big part of South African medicine or South African healthcare system. But there's a very large segment of the South African population that does not have access to private healthcare. And our public hospitals are really overworked, understaffed. And there's some incredible doctors and nurses in our public hospitals. Tembisa Hospital, as an example, there's staff there that really, they go above and beyond, and they really do the best that they can with what little they have. So I think, but generally speaking, apart from the challenges that we face in South Africa, I think we compare quite well with the standard of medical care that we can provide.
Absolutely. I'm looking at, as we are trying to compare ourselves to the other countries, I've seen a lot of, would I say, an influx to other countries like, I'm not saying the Middle East as such, but where there's UAE, the Arab side of the world, where they like looking up to getting our medical personnel, the nurses and everything on that. How would you then respond to that and saying, indeed, we are in demand, the whole world?
Absolutely. So that's one of the challenges that we face in South Africa, is that our medical staff is poached by the rest of the world. And not just the Middle East. Our doctors and nurses and our paramedics, all our healthcare professionals, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, across the board, our surgeons, our specialists, they are very sought after across the world. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the UK, as of late, Saudi Arabia, the UAE. And I think the South African caliber of medical professional is different in the sense that we are taught to deal with such a wide variety of things within our specialities. You know, our medical doctors, our specialists, they see such a variety of things that when they go to countries like the UK or Canada, they bring with them experience that those countries don't necessarily have a lot of.
Okay.
So yes, but that's definitely a challenge. Our medical staff across the board, our nurses,
being poached.
yeah, absolutely, and it's a financial decision as well. The salaries that they provide is just much better than what is available in South Africa.
Okay. Now, going back to the comparison of the two sectors, that private and public. In the past, I think the public used to give the best and the basic before the private got this big. Now, I'm looking at places like, you touched on military earlier on. I'm looking at places like Pretoria, and I had a privilege of residing in Pretoria. So when I got there, I saw that there was the entire hospital for an eye. It's called Eye Institute. You had a hospital, the whole institute for an ear, you know, for the heart and all those. So I was fascinated to see that in Pretoria, as much as we don't have all the resources in all the provinces in the country. However, I saw a model in Pretoria that has specialization in every aspect of the medical side of things. As a Pretoria boy, and given that there's military that is involved and all that, and I don't want to mention specific hospitals, but I had the privilege of getting treated in one of those. What can you say in terms of the setup of hospitals in Pretoria, as I referred to, and also in other areas of our country?
Look, I don't think it's fair to always compare the public healthcare to private healthcare, because I think they cater for different. Although they're all in healthcare, you know, the public. It's much easier for a private hospital to say we are going to specialize in neurology, or we're going to specialize in oncology, and then they focus on that, and then they can pull that specific patient to that hospital. Whereas the public side, they don't have that privilege. They have to cover for everything. I think the setup that we have, you know, again, there's some public hospitals where if I have a certain injury, if I can, as an example, and this is my personal opinion.
Okay.
Baragwanath Hospital burn unit. If I ever suffer burns,
yes,
please take me to Baragwanath Hospital burn unit.
Wow.
Because in my opinion, that is the best you will ever be.
Yes.
So, and you know, I'm pretty sure that in other provinces, in Cape Town, in the Eastern Cape, I'm sure that there are public hospitals that have similar units and similar capabilities. I think what makes it difficult is just they are so overwhelmed.
Yes.
But from a private healthcare point of view, I mean, the setup in Pretoria, there's quite a lot of specialist hospitals there. There's day hospitals. There's, like you mentioned, Ear Institute. There's specific cardiology hospitals. And they obviously cater for a niche type of patient.
Yes.
And they obviously pull those specialists as well. And they have the cardiologist hospitals would have the cath labs and specific cardiac theaters and ICUs, and the nursing staff will be specialized in cardiac care. But I mean, general hospitals that's the standard.
Yeah. There's another dynamic when it comes to, you mentioned that earlier on, someone said you are in transport business, transporting the patient into them. Now, Both in public, I'm not sure of the private, and you cautioned me to say let's not compare the two, but it's just a practical example. Here's a patient, you are at casualty. In other countries, they call it something else. You are at a casualty where the patient needs to be attended by the hospital staff. Explain that handing over, because there's a lot of delays, if I may put it that way. You coming from private, you are taking this patient, say, to the nearest public hospital. What are some of those things that are like barriers or impediments between yourselves as paramedics and the staff?
So again, we've had situations where public hospitals are really overwhelmed. You arrive with a patient, and there is maybe 1-2 doctors on duty, maybe 4 or 5 nursing staff, and there's 150 patients waiting for them. And then you as an ambulance arrive, and I think the challenge is, as a private ambulance or private healthcare, obviously like any business in a capitalist economy, is looking to make a profit.
Absolutely.
So it doesn't matter if you're in the emergency services, that's the purpose of running a business, right? Yes. Whereas public healthcare, they don't have that concern. They're not concerned about profit. Okay. So obviously the ambulance arrives at the emergency department and they want to offload that patient as quickly as possible because the next call is waiting. Yeah. But you can't just drop the patient off because there's a process to follow. But now because the public hospital is so overwhelmed and so understaffed because of the volumes that they have to deal with, you end up, I mean, it's nothing unusual for an ambulance to be at a public facility for 1.5, 2 hours trying to hand over a patient, trying to find a bed, and just, and it's not because the medical staff are not willing to help. They are always. I've had doctors in tears at Edenvale Hospital saying to me, I just don't have a bed. I physically do not have a bed to put your patient on.
That's scary.
It's a challenge for us. But the handover process is you try and work with the hospital staff as much as you can. You try and accommodate them as much as you can. Sometimes as ambulance staff, you start walking into the hospital and if you see an empty bed, you steal it and you take it to casualty, and so you can put your patient on it. But it's difficult for the public healthcare staff to sometimes cope with, and especially there's times of the month, times of the year where it really is busy. End of the month, whenever it's payday. You can know the first Friday after the end of the month, Saturday, the first weekend is usually absolute chaos. Wow. Especially with alcohol-related incidences.
Without mentioning specific race or specific place, generally
it's across the board. It's across the board. Alcohol is colorblind.
It is.
Alcohol is colorblind.
Did you hear the latest stats? They were like scary.
Yeah.
Billions and billions were spent during the festive season.
I think it was 7 billion.
Yes. Only on alcohol.
South Africans must never tell me that they are poor, because if they can spend so much money on alcohol.
Yes. And there are those attempts that the law should be stricter now when it comes to people who are caught up being drunk, drinking and driving. In terms of the stringent laws, either you lose your license altogether for life, unlike being renewing it and all those and all that stuff. But it's on social media. People are saying people shouldn't be allowed on the roads because they're killing innocent lives. Going back to one point that was very interesting when you were saying, pardon me, I'll go and in and out of public and private. When you say this is capitalist state where business is like a profit and all that. Now, there is this, I'm trying to avoid politics as much as possible. There's this NHI that is trying to assist the greater majority of people, and it's like it's threatening the private sector as such when it comes to the medical attention, talking of like the medical schemes, the medical aid, and all of that. Do you have perhaps a thought on that?
I think if I can say one thing, it would be that the solution would be for government and private to work together.
Yeah.
There's no winners if the private sector is pushing against government in every way, and government is trying to undermine the private sector, if I can put it that way. I'm not saying that it's not happening. I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of communication happening in the background that we don't know of, or that's not necessarily reported in the media. But I think what government is trying to do in theory is maybe a good idea. I think the practical implementation, I'm not too sure whether we are going about it the right way.
Yeah.
I'm by no means an expert. I just, from my limited view from the outside or semi-inside, being in the emergency medical services, I think we're going to face some challenges. And I think that's the story of South Africa. If you look just at our tax base, we have 60 million people in South Africa. Mm-hmm. I think the latest stats was 42 or 43% unemployment. Mm-hmm. And, SARS having a tax base of 6 or 7 million people that pays tax. Mm-hmm. And that's the rock and the hard place that government finds themselves in. Mm-hmm. They have a responsibility to 60 million people. Mm-hmm. They have a constitutional responsibility to 60 million citizens.
Sure.
And I think that's what makes it difficult for government. Yes. So what they're trying to do, I think, like I said, is very honorable, or it's. I think they're moving in the right direction. Yes. Whether we've got the perfect model, we can't model ourselves after the UK. Yes. There's no comparison.
Because we're unique. Every country is
absolutely
unique.
So we have to take a little bit from all of those examples, and create a uniquely South African setup where we can have access to adequate healthcare for all our citizens. Yes. Because that's what the Constitution ultimately demands.
Wants us to do, yes. And there's nothing wrong in benchmarking or putting a threshold in terms of a specific industry, not alone only in medicine, and other industries as well, so that we're there, because of part of the global village now, we're no longer like isolated. Now, I'm taking you back. Before we get into one of the interesting stories that you're going to tell, I'm looking at the beginning of each year, people take resolutions. Other people go to the gym, other people start businesses, this and that and the other. Now, let's talk to matriculants, people who have written their matric the previous year, and at the beginning of the year, they want to also venture into other careers like paramedics. How would you then advise or encourage the matriculants to sort of gravitate towards your profession?
So for the youngsters out there, emergency medicine has evolved quite a lot. There is currently 3 options to get into the emergency services. So the first is a national higher certificate, which is called, oh my goodness. Now it's
you'll think about
gone
it.
out of my mind.
Yeah, it's fine.
But it's a 12-month program,
Yes.
and that's the entry level.
The entry level. Okay.
Then there's a 2-year national diploma, It used to be called ECT, or Emergency Care Technician. I don't know if it is still, the names changed so many times.
Yeah.
And then the pinnacle of the profession at the moment is a 4-year degree.
Wow.
So the UKZN, University of KwaZulu-Natal.
Yes.
UJ, University of Johannesburg.
Yeah.
UCT, not UCT, Cape Peninsula Siput.
Oh, okay.
Cape Peninsula University of Technology, I think.
Yeah. It used to be Cape Tech.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then in Port Elizabeth, there's the University of
The Nelson Mandela.
Yes, yeah, Nelson
Wusu.
Mandela Bay, yes.
Yes.
Those are 4 universities that I know that present the degree program. It's a 4-year degree.
Yes.
It's a bachelor's in science.
Oh.
So obviously maths, science,
will be the requirement.
Those are requirements.
Yeah. With good marks, of course, not just doing it.
Absolutely. No, I mean, there's a whole stringent process of admission. Okay. Including fitness. You have to have a certain level of fitness, physical fitness. Yes. And then once you finish the 4-year program, you then register as what they call an ECP, or Emergency Care Practitioner, Paramedic, with the Health Professions Council. Yes. And then you start your career. So the first one that I mentioned is called ECA.
Okay.
Emergency Care Assistant.
Or the one that slapped your mind earlier on. Okay.
Yes, that's the one. So, so those are the 3 basic levels. So, I would imagine if there's a youngster that is finishing matric and maybe they only have math literacy, or they didn't take maths, and they still want to be in the emergency services, I think it's not the end of the world. I think ECA and ECT is still available to them, the national diploma or the national certificate. Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, the ECA is on an NQF 5 level. Okay. ECT is NQF 6 or 6, I think 6. And then obviously the degree, the BSc degree, it's called a BSc in EMC, a Bachelor's of Science in Emergency Medical Care. Wow. That would be an NQF 8, I think. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. It's metric plus 4.
Yes, basically, yes. Okay. Under the new SACWA National Qualifications Framework system that government has implemented. Yeah. But that's the route. Obviously, that's the medical side. There's always the fire department side, which is also the rescue, fire and rescue services. Yes. A good place to start would be SAISI, the South African Emergency Services Institute. Okay. They have a website, and just to try and find out who provides firefighter training, where to go, the rescue training, swift water rescue, high angle rescue, motor vehicle rescue, confined space rescue. Those are all different courses that they can complete within the fire and rescue setup. So incidentally, the ECPs, the 4-year university program, is a combination of, so within the 4 years they do the medical side, but they also include, and that's where the physical fitness comes in, they also include the rescue side. Okay. So the ECPs are, and again, that's why our guys are so poached so often, because our ECPs...
The standards are high, the training standards in South Africa are high.
Yes, they are rescue... They are rescue qualified, they are medically qualified at a very high level. Yes. And I think our universities produce high quality candidates. Yeah. The ECPs are really well trained. In Pretoria, Joburg, where I work, a lot of my colleagues are from UJ, from UKZN, and these guys know what they're doing. Yeah. If I'm ever in need, I wouldn't mind having one of them treat me.
You see, South Africa is in transition, right? We're coming from the old time, which we won't refer to it. We are moving towards, like I said, we are in global village now. Our parents used to be, maybe ourselves as well, we used to be obsessed with certain professions, like being a lawyer, being a teacher, being a doctor. Now you'll find a pressure from the parents to say, my child, I want him or her to be a what? To be a doctor. Would you say all this information that we have shared in terms of the medical side of things, would one use it as a springboard to get into the mainstream medicine as a doctor? What would you say? How would you relate the two, paramedics and the medical doctor?
So I usually I have a joke that I always tell. When sometimes when you arrive on scene, people ask, "Are you a doctor?" And then I just jokingly say, "Ma'am, I studied medicine, but then I specialized, and I became a paramedic."
Yeah.
So, but look, it is very difficult to the entry requirements into medicine.
Yeah.
Is very difficult in South Africa. Obviously, there's very limited space.
Yeah.
So obviously, the universities have their own requirements for credit for previous studies and such. But when you do the 4-year degree, the BSc degree for emergency care or emergency medicine, or I think your chances of then applying at one of the universities for admission to the medicine program would be much better than if you were straight from school. That being said, again, it depends on each specific university and how much space they have available on their medical or their medicine program, and whatever credits they would afford you from your paramedicine studies. I know the ECP guys, they do pharmacology to a certain level, they do anatomy, physiology to a certain level, and then obviously there's a focus on emergency medicine. So there is overlap with medicine or the doctor training, but I would also say that once you've tasted emergency medicine, you would find it very hard to go back to anything else.
Wow.
A lot of my colleagues were paramedics and then transitioned to medicine and became doctors. And once they became doctors, they became emergency doctors.
Okay. All
They
right.
still fly on the helicopter. They still work on the road on a response car, or they work in an emergency department, a casualty department.
Yeah.
Because once that bug has bitten you, emergency medicine it's in your blood.
All right. Now we're coming to that part, that interesting part. With all your experience, with all your expertise and everything else, we are told that many years ago, I don't know whether it's 16 years ago or what, without revealing, there's what we call a doctor-patient confidentiality. Without breaking that, perhaps one interesting story that you would want maybe to share that happened to you during when you had the call in Pretoria.
So there's so much that has happened in my career, but there's one or two that always stands out. One specific one that I can think of that'll always stay with me is a patient that was running a marathon in the Moot area.
Pretoria Moot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he collapsed. Right behind him was running 2 medical doctors.
They were part of the marathon.
Yes.
Okay.
They saw this happening. They initiated CPR. Emergency services were called, and we arrived on scene. And we initiated treatment. We took him to hospital, and 2 hours later, they phoned me to transfer him to another hospital. So I walk into the casualty unit thinking, this is a critically ill patient. He collapsed. They were doing CPR. He was, for all intents and purposes, deceased. And as I walk in, this man is sitting up, awake, talking to me. He knows his name. He knows where he is. He's fully orientated. That for me is one that stays with me that will stay with me my entire life.
Wow.
Another one, which you will definitely relate to.
Yeah.
It was not much different than the weather we have today.
Yes.
It was one of those high-felt thunderstorms, those extreme thunderstorms.
Yeah. It was the 8th of October, 2007, I'm told.
And I was dispatched to a motor vehicle accident. Nothing special. Same. You get into the vehicle, you go there as quickly as possible. So
Where is
arrived on
this
scene.
happening now? In Pretoria?
This was in Centurion, yeah, Littleton area. Littleton, yes. Arrived on scene, and again, I found a patient in a vehicle in a very, very critical condition, unconscious. Yeah, he was really critical. And as life would have it, an unbelievable thunderstorm erupted at that moment. So the scene was already chaos because you had this accident, and this person was in this vehicle, critically injured, and then you have the heavens opening up with just so much rain. It was unbelievable. So I ended up leaving my response car by the side of the road, and we all got into the ambulance, and we went to hospital with the patient. I think what made that call for me also very special or unique was our total scene time from the moment we arrived on scene until we extricated him out of the vehicle in the ambulance and got him to hospital was under 20 minutes.
What was the state of the patient at the time?
No, he was critical. He was unconscious. What we would say in the Glasgow Coma Score, GCS, Glasgow Coma Score. It's a score out of 15. It is your level of consciousness. And his at that stage was 3 out of 15, which is the lowest that you can get. It was 3 out of 15. He had no reaction to any stimulus, external stimulus. In fact, I administered some medication because he was having seizures at that stage. Later, we would determine it was because of a very bad head injury. But yeah, that call for me was. I mean, when I finished that call, I was wet to the bone. I was drenched. All of us, all the ambulance crew was wet to the bone. But we felt almost a sense of relief that we could manage to get the patient to hospital so quickly.
That critical time that you referred to, say golden hour.
The golden hour, yeah.
Yes.
So what's interesting there is that clock starts ticking when the accident happens, not when the medical staff starts treating the patient.
Yeah.
So you can imagine, the accident happens and then 1 or 2 minutes ticks by, people call emergency services. It takes, 2 or 3 minutes for that whole process. Then we start responding. It takes us 10 minutes to get to scene. So by the time that there's a medical professional next to you, 20 minutes has already gone by of that golden hour.
It might be a challenge, the name of the patient, to call it, but you can use the other nickname. Maybe in telling our viewers, where is the patient now? What is the nature of interaction with him and all that? Looking at this camera, tell them, who is this patient?
So the amazing thing about that call specifically was it was a couple of months. I can't remember exactly how many. I was sitting in the office doing administrative work, and I get a phone call. And it was the hospital manager saying, listen, they need to see me. So immediately you're like, oh, what did I do? I'm in trouble. So it turns out the patient made an incredible recovery, fully recovered. And he requested to meet the medical staff that treated him. from the nursing staff and the theatre staff, the surgeons, and then it included me. And I had the privilege of meeting this patient, and he made a 100% recovery. And if I may,
please.
For the last, so it was 2008, right? So
2007.
2007, right. Yeah. So that's now 17 years. Mm-hmm. For the last 17 years, we've had contact, and I've got the privilege of sitting across from him today, and having a conversation with a man that, when I arrived on scene, I initially thought was already deceased.
Wow.
Wow. So yeah, that call for that day, it's a day that I will definitely never forget in my entire life.
Nee, baie dankie man. Luister, Hannes, as we grow, we won't claim that it is because of our intelligence. It was because of our individuality. They say when you want to go far, walk with other people. But if you want to just go here, just walk alone. Now, there are those people that walk with you in terms of your career, in terms of your life, the family life, and everything else. What are those, or who are those people that you want to mention? They can marry in Afrikaans praat as jy wil. Yeah, looking at that camera. So, some met your friends and enige persoon.
I think from a personal perspective, my parents obviously played a very big role in supporting me in becoming a paramedic, and I've had, through the years, I've had some ups and downs where I've had really bad, I've lost patients, and it's really stayed with me. Obviously, my wife, Leanne, she's also a medic.
Talk to her. She's listening.
So she's my rock and have always supported me. From a professional point of view, I mentioned Johan Clausen earlier. I think he is the one example. From the first day that I met him, I said to my mom one day, I said, I want to be a paramedic like him one day. Okay. I want to be able to practice paramedicine the same way he does. That's I think those are the people in my life that have really made a difference for me. That I have friends that have come with me a long way. They're not necessarily in the emergency services. They don't always understand. No, man, I'm putting me on the spot. Yeah, but yes, my family is definitely. Hulle het vir my baie beteken. En my wanneer ek regtig swaar gekry het, jy weet waar ek gevoel het, dinge raak te veel, was my familie nog altyd vir my 'n rots om op te steun. So that's it.
Wow. Baie dankie meneer man, and we appreciate your time to take your time out in your busy schedule and come and embrace our Town-Tok podcast. And we've been trying this for some time now. Finally, you are here. Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor and it's a privilege and to be sitting across from you and having a conversation.
Yeah.
And I know it's taken us forever, but we finally made it happen, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not how we start, but it's how we end. Yeah,
absolutely.
And thank you very much. Let me say to our followers on YouTube, ladies and gentlemen, once more, thank you for taking our time to subscribe, to like, and to share our videos. We're looking forward to getting to the next episode. I'm thinking now as I'm speaking that we need Hannes to do part 2 of what we're talking about, because he seemed to be very passionate about what he does. So we will reschedule a part 2 of this episode and share other things that perhaps might interest you. Like I always say, please make sure that you follow us, you subscribe and you share. You know, people ask, why do you subscribe? You subscribe so that anything and everything else that comes out of our podcast, you are the first one to be reminded. Automatically, it will come to your space, tell you that we have another Hannes next time, and so on and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, Mzimase Ngailu signing out.